I arrived in Salem on a gray Friday afternoon at the end of October. The sky seemed caught between rain and nightfall, and the damp air clung to my jacket as if it were colder than the 55 degrees Fahrenheit showing on the dashboard of the rental car. After a few hours driving down I-5, I heard the GPS announce the exit, and I felt that strange mix of relief and unease that always comes with arriving in an unfamiliar place. I had passed through Salem before, usually on my way to Portland or Eugene. On those occasions, I only stopped to grab a coffee at Dutch Brothers or fill up at a Chevron station. But I had never really stayed. This time was different. I had booked 2 nights in a small Airbnb near downtown, more out of curiosity than necessity. Driving through the city streets, I noticed the contrast between well-kept residential lawns and old buildings that seemed to carry decades of history. The trees were already half bare, their orange leaves carpeting the sidewalks. The air felt transitional, and it seemed like the whole city breathed a quiet melancholy. The Airbnb host had sent detailed instructions. The key would be in a coded lockbox near the door, and there would be no need for direct contact. When I parked in front of the small wooden house, I took a deep breath. The silence of the neighborhood, broken only by the distant rumble of a truck, gave me the sense of stepping into a place suspended in time. I didn't know it yet, but this quick visit to Salem would end up leading me to the old abandoned mill, a place the town didn't want to forget, yet didn't dare to mention. The next morning, I decided to explore the city a little before heading toward the mill. Salem's narrow, winding streets reminded me of old maps, dotted with local cafes, bakeries, and small shops that seemed frozen in time. I passed by Word of Mouth Bistro, a diner well known among locals, and stopped for a strong black coffee, watching the city's slow rhythm. While chatting with the waitress about the weather and Salem's history, she casually mentioned the old paper mill. Don't go there alone. Strange things happen in that place. I just smiled and thanked her, assuming it was the typical small-town story, local exaggerations and mysteries for outsiders to chew on. A little later, I got in the car and followed Highway 22 along the Santiam River. The side road to the mill was narrow and lined with dense trees, the smell of wet wood and damp leaves thick in the air. The closer I got, the more the silhouette of the mill rose on the horizon, a red brick structure with broken windows and no trespassing signs posted at every entrance. Time seemed to have stopped there. I parked on the shoulder, a few dozen yards from the building, and studied the facade. Some details stood out: broken Budweiser bottles and Pepsi cans from the 70s scattered on the ground, rusted tools, splintered wood. It was impossible not to feel that time had left something tangible there, as if the building still carried echoes of what had once happened. Crossing the small lot toward the main entrance, a shiver ran down my spine. The mill wasn't just abandoned, it felt alive in a quiet, unsettling way. I didn't know it yet, but every step was pulling me closer to something the entire town tried to bury, something that refused to be forgotten. I pushed open the main door, its rusty hinges groaning, the sound echoing across the vast empty space. The wooden floor was rotted in spots, and the air smelled of mold mixed with old smoke. The silence was nearly perfect, broken only by the wind slipping through shattered windows. As I walked down the central corridor, I froze at a sudden crack, sharp, like a board giving way under an invisible weight. I looked around, but no one was there. Just shadows cast by beams and debris, shifting with the fading daylight. I forced myself forward, trying to rationalize. Maybe rats, or just the building settling after decades of neglect. But the noise came again, now joined by a steady drip, like water falling into a metal bucket. The sound bounced around the hall, impossible to trace. In a corner, I found a half-burned notebook. Its yellowed pages were filled with 1977 shift notes. Some names were crossed out, others underlined in fading ink. My heart pounded as I read lines like, "Never leave alone at night," and "The clock won't wait." The words carried desperation, but also incompleteness, as if the writer had stopped mid-thought. For the first time, I felt the real weight of being watched. A chill ran through me. I knew no one else was inside, and yet the sense of being followed was undeniable, quiet, patient. I told myself it was just imagination, old stories, solitude, the damp air playing tricks. But the noises kept pulsing, steady, almost like the building was breathing with me. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just an abandoned mill. Something there didn't want to be forgotten. The light drained quickly, shadows deepening into unsettling shapes. I decided it was time to leave, but the hallways seemed to repeat, looping like a maze. Every door, every shattered window looked both familiar and wrong, as if the building was silently rearranging itself. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Measured. They matched the frantic rhythm of my heart. At first I tried to brush it off as echoes, but they stayed behind me, deliberate, too real to dismiss. The smell of smoke thickened though no fire burned. Instinct screamed at me to run, but my body hesitated, frozen as though the walls themselves were holding me. Then I saw him. A man, distant at first, his outline hazy under the broken beams. His clothes looked decades out of place. His eyes, empty, fixed, locked on mine. He moved closer, step by step, silent except for the weight of his presence. When he stopped just a few yards away, he whispered, "Nobody ever really leaves this place. Not after that night." My breath caught. I tried to ask who he was, what he meant, but he only gave me a cryptic look before disappearing into a side hallway. I rushed after him, only to find a solid, unbroken wall. No door. No passage. Just cold brick. Panic took hold. I stumbled through the corridors until finally breaking into the night air. The chill wind hit my face, but the feeling of being followed clung to me. As I started the car and left the mill behind, a grim certainty settled. The place wasn't just abandoned. It held memories, maybe spirits, or something the town had chosen to bury. And now, unwillingly, I was part of it. The next morning, I woke to the faint sound of sirens and the smell of fresh coffee from a bakery down the street. Trying to shake off the anxiety from the night before, I decided to explore Salem more carefully, searching for why the town seemed to carry so much history but left so little in plain sight. Walking downtown, I noticed plaques and old buildings dating back to the early 1900s. The architecture itself seemed to whisper stories, as if each brick still carried pieces of lives that hadn't completely left. When I casually asked a local about the abandoned mill, he only smiled oddly and said, "So you've seen it. Not a place for the curious." The comment unsettled me, but it only deepened my curiosity. Later, I found a small bookstore filled with yellowed books and forgotten journals. Leafing through one, I stumbled across references to the mill, workers who had gone missing, unreported accidents, and accounts of a strange presence said to watch anyone who got too close. Each line chilled me, as though I were reading something that wasn't past, but still alive. I knew then I had to go back. Not out of bravery, but out of a gnawing need to understand. The mill wasn't just an old structure, it was a fixed point, where memory and fear, maybe something more, converged. And Salem, quietly, had built a routine of forgetting around it, leaving the building like a secret no one dared name. As the sun sank, the golden light hit the mill's broken windows, throwing sharp reflections. The sense of being watched grew heavier. By the time I reached the entrance, the building seemed bigger than before, as though it had grown overnight. Its silence pressed on me. Something was waiting inside. Crossing the rusted gate again, my stomach tightened. The silence was suffocating, thicker than before. Each step echoed mockingly off the walls, as though the building itself was aware of me. I moved down the main corridor, but like the day before, the hallways seemed altered, rearranged. The mill wasn't just a place, it was alive, reacting. Then came the whispers. Low, indistinct, from all sides at once. I couldn't make out the words, but every syllable carried urgency, warning. My skin prickled. And then he appeared. The man in old clothes stood at a distance, staring with unrelenting eyes. My chest pounded, but I couldn't look away. He stepped closer, silent but unavoidable. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice firm but almost mournful. Some places keep what can't be forgotten. The words froze me. Shadows along the corridor twisted unnaturally, like the building itself was breathing. I bolted, stumbling over debris, searching for the exit. Behind me, metal groaned. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows rattled violently, and the man dissolved back into the darkness, swallowed by the structure that had conjured him. When I finally burst through the front door, the cold air hit like salvation. The mill loomed silently behind me, motionless, but I knew better. It was no ruin. It was a keeper of memories, and I had crossed a line Salem had long chosen to ignore. Leaving the mill, the Salem air felt heavier, thick with the weight of the night before. Every step back to the car sent my pulse racing, as if the town itself was tracking me. Forgetting wasn't an option anymore, the mill had left a mark no time could erase. Driving downtown, the streets looked unnervingly quiet. The cafes and shops that had felt welcoming now seemed like watch posts, each window hiding unseen eyes. The feeling of being followed hadn't stayed behind in the mill, it had spread into the city itself. Back at the Airbnb, I tried to reason it out while unpacking. Maybe it was exhaustion, too much curiosity, or just the damp, heavy October air. But the sense of being watched wouldn't leave. Every shadow felt intentional, every floorboard creak reminded me of those measured steps. I grabbed my notebook and started writing everything, the smell of mold and smoke, the groaning wood, the half-burned logbook with unfinished warnings, the figure of the man and his cryptic voice. The more I wrote, the clearer it felt. Salem didn't want me to forget. It wanted the story recorded. The next morning, before leaving town, I walked through the streets once more. From a distance, I looked back at the mill, its broken windows, its tired brick walls. To most, it was just another derelict building. But I knew the truth. It held things the town had tried to bury, people, events, memories that would never truly fade. As I drove south along I-5, an unease lingered. The sun shone as if nothing had happened, but part of Salem came with me. And deep inside, I carried the certainty that some stories never let go, not for the town, not for those who dare to walk its paths.